Yeah, so hi everyone, and welcome to this interviewing series where we interview computer science faculty to learn about their job search and interview experience to help future faculty candidates. And today we are here with Valerio Terrani, who recently joined the University of Auckland as a lecturer. Valerio's research is primarily in software engineering and specifically software testing. So congratulations, Valeria, and it's great to have you here.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you're actually currently still in Europe, right? So when will you move to New Zealand?
Yeah, I'm in Europe because of the COVID situation is unclear when I will go to Auckland, but I started remotely since last February. So yeah, hopefully beginning of next year, they will open the borders and I will be able to move there.
Let's hope so.
Yeah.
So you started remotely. Did you,
Yes.
will you also already have some teaching duties, for example?
Yes, yes. Because in Auckland, the semester starts in March and ends mid of July. And then the next semester we start in July and end in November. So actually I already finished my first semester at the University of Auckland, and I had to choose courses to teach.
Was also teaching release ever a discussion also?
Yes, it was a little bit released because of course I cannot do the lectures on site, so I had some reduce duties. Yeah.
And did you also already start looking for PhD students?
Not yet, because I still have to apply for grants, and after I will have some grants, I will start to look for. But the good aspect is that I'm co-supervising some PhD students and master students with other faculty members of the university.
Yeah, let's chat also a bit about what you did before. One thing that I found very interesting is that you did your PhD at the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, right? So can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So actually, I wanted to do an experience abroad, and of course, Hong Kong is a very exciting place to be. And actually, I joined the university as a visiting student during my master degree. So I did not start there with a PhD. And since I like there very much, and I really enjoy the research group and everything, I decided to stay for the PhD.
And how did you get in contact with your advisor? So I guess already during your studies as a master student?
Yeah. So basically, I asked one of my professors in Italy whether he knew someone in Asia that available for an internship, and the Italian professor put me in contact with my PhD advisor, and then we start this collaboration.
And how easy or difficult was it to adjust to this different culture and environment?
Yeah, honestly, it has been very difficult at the beginning, especially because I was the only non-Chinese student in the group. But after a while, I adjusted very well. In fact, with my fellow PhD colleagues, I think we have a very good relationship, and I think they will be my lifelong friends.
Sounds great. Was, for example, a language ever a problem?
I think the language itself was not the problem because, of course, everyone speaks very good English in that university. I think it was more about cultural differences.
And do you also have any advice for, let's say, other Europeans that want to follow a similar path on how to get adjusted and how to adapt?
So my advice is to be open-minded and accept different ways of thinking, and always respect other cultures. And yeah, but integrating will be difficult at the beginning, but you must be patient. But in the end, everything will be good.
And after your PhD, you moved to Lugano, right?
I joined USI in Lugano after a PhD because I decided to go back to Europe to see my family and friends, and also because it's a good university. It's very small, but they are very famous and good professors. And I think my postdoc experience was very helpful for my career because I start to advise some PhD students, and this, of course, something very important.
And did you already decide that you want to apply for academic positions after finishing your PhD or as a postdoc?
After finishing my PhD, yeah. During my final year, I thought, okay, this is the life I want to do. I want to do research, I want to teach, and I want to be part in the academia life.
And you're originally from Italy, right?
Yeah.
So you already touched upon it, namely that you, I guess, have friends and family in Italy. So how did this influence basically your career path, and also like what kind of advice do you have for people that still have family and friends in other countries and then being like far away from them?
So my advice is to always keep in touch with your family, especially should call your parents very often. This is something important. And regarding the friends, of course, it is important to keep contact, but do not rely too much about them, because actually you should find new friends in a new place. This is very important.
What does the academic landscape and system look like in New Zealand?
New Zealand is very similar to UK. So basically, we have a lecturer, which is my position actually, and then there is a senior lecturer above the bar, associate professor, and professor. So lecturer is equivalent to assistant professor, and a senior lecturer is equivalent to associate professor, and associate professor is equivalent to professor.
And did you already look into how the funding system works in New Zealand? You mentioned that you will need to seek funding to fund students.
So basically, I would apply for some external funding from companies. And regarding New Zealand specific grants, yes, there are some grants that are for New Zealand universities.
Mhm. And can you also give us an overview of your interview experience, of the interviewing season in general? For example, to how many institutions did you apply? How many interviews did you have, either over Zoom or in person, and so on?
Okay, so I applied for about 10 positions, and I got 5 on interviews and about 3 on-site interviews and 1 remote interview.
Okay, well, that sounds like a high success rate.
Yes.
And let's perhaps chat a bit about preparing for the interviewing season. And my first question there is, like, at what time were you applying for positions? When did you start applying?
I started applying in the beginning of 2019 after my 2 years of postdoc, and I think it was the winter break, so I just work on it full time, of course, because it's a very hard process to do.
So how did you decide for what kind of institutions to apply for?
So mostly I was driven by the location, because I would prefer the places where the first language, the native language, is English, because I think that learning a new language good enough for teaching is something very difficult to do, and I would like to spend my energy in my work and in my personal life. So I don't want to spend too much time in learning a new language.
Just I'm curious, perhaps an off-topic question. While you were in Asia, did you also learn other new languages, for example, Cantonese or so? No.
Yeah, I tried, of course. I tried both Mandarin and Cantonese, but in the end I was very confused. So I basically stopped learning, because actually they are very different, especially the Cantonese, because every single letter, they have many tones, and actually can pronounce in a very different way. and it's very difficult to speak and to let people understand.
I see, right. And how did you search for open positions?
So I searched for open position. First of all, I look into the SE World mailing list, which is one of the most popular mailing lists in software engineering, which they are often send email about conference, but also about job openings.
Mhm.
And also I use the website timeshighereducation.com, which I think is very updated and is well organized.
I see. Okay. Did you also consider applying for positions in industry?
No, I didn't. Yeah, I just applied for academic positions.
And how did you get started preparing your application materials? Also, what was necessary for your application at the University of Auckland?
Mhm. So I think it's standard for every application to have a CV, the research statements, teaching statements, and also cover letter. So these are the main things. And of course, you need to prepare for a job talk, and in some cases also for a teaching demo. But it was not the case for Auckland.
I see.
Mhm.
And what do you believe is the most important part of this application package, or also job talk and so on? So what, like, if you had to rank these individual elements, which would have, which kind of components would have the highest importance?
Okay, so I think the number one is, of course, the job talk, because it's the moment that all the faculty members are there and they're actually listening about you, about your research. And I will rank the second to be the CV, because the CV, of course, is important and you need to prepare it carefully. Then I think the cover letter is also important. Be sure that you write a cover letter specific for that university. And also, I think the next one will be the research statement. And at last, I would say the teaching statement.
You mentioned to tailor the cover letter for the individual institution. So, did you get any kind of feedback for the institution? For example, that someone mentioned something that you wrote in the cover letter, or
No,
and how did you bring your job talk to a great shape?
I just tried many times, and it's very important to ask your peers, like your colleagues or your friends, to actually listen about your presentation. Especially, it's important that you include some people that are outside your research area, because most probably the majority of people there, they're not familiar with your topic. So you need to be sure that your talk is accessible to everyone.
Like you already mentioned it, that you ask your peers and
Mhm.
many people for feedback.
Mhm.
How often did you, let's say, iterate over the job talk until you thought it was in a good shape to present?
I would say about 5 times around. Each time
See.
I had a on-site interview. Yeah.
How did you approach, because in the research statement, you also have typically a section about your future work, and I guess it's easier to write about the work you've already done. So how do you approach writing this section about future work?
So what I did, I just tried to think about the long-term future works about my current research.
Mhm.
And somehow I managed to put everything together and in a good way. But it's important that the statement relates on what you did, not only on what you want to do, because it's important that you show that actually you are familiar with the topic and you are an expert in the topic.
Mhm. Then what suggestions do you have for getting strong recommendation letters and also for approaching your letter writers?
My suggestion is, of course, you have to choose people that knows you very well, not only for the professional point of view, but also for the personal point of view.
Mhm.
And of course, you should ask a PhD advisor and postdoc host. And in my case, I also asked about to a professor, in which I had a collaboration for a paper.
Sounds good. And in general, like what's the role of networking and contacts? And perhaps more specifically, Did you already have any connections at the University of Auckland, any contacts that you approached before or when you were applying?
In my case, I did not know anyone there. So actually, in my case, for Auckland, no. But in general, I think it's very important to have some a connection, because it's very important to see a familiar face during that very tiring day.
Yeah, you did your PhD in the Asian Pacific region and now also accepted a lecturer position in this region. So what are your thoughts on mobility and also geographical location? For example, how easy is it to move from one region to another? And one observation that I had was that actually most people typically stay within a broad geographical location. So do you think this is mainly due to personal preference, also related with the professional network that you have as the specific place?
So in my case, it's for personal preferences, and I think that of course is very challenging to exchange a location, especially if you go far away. But for the professional network, I don't think it's very important, because actually you can keep working with your high school colleagues from another location.
Okay, great. So I would say let's continue chatting about interviewing.
Mm-hmm.
And the first question there is, did you have a phone call, like a phone interview with the University of Auckland?
Yes, I did, and it was a Skype interview. Of course, it was short, but it was like a phone interview. And after that, I got the invitation to do the on-site interview.
Do you still remember what the structure of the phone interview was? Did you ask you some of the, let's say, standard questions? For example, what's your future work on, why this institution, and so on?
So you mean the phone interviews or
the phone interview?
Okay, phone interview. Yeah, for the phone interviews, they just asked me to present myself and just summarize my research contributions and my goal for the future.
And then afterwards, for the full visit, what was the structure?
The structure, it was a one-day interview. So basically, I arrived in the beginning of December, and then I had one day to rest because it was a very long flight from Europe to New Zealand.
Mhm.
And then the interview was a one-day event. And I had first the interview with the panel, then I had a visit of the campus, and then I talked with some professor, and then after lunch I had job talk.
You just mentioned also that you had a panel interview, and I think that many people might not be familiar with it. So what's a panel interview? Who or how many people attended, and what kind of questions would you expect in such an interview?
So in that interview are all the members of the hiring a committee, which are basically the professor. They are in charge of deciding who will cover the position. And in my case, there were around, I would say, 8 people. And there were also professors from outside the department. And the question they asked me were standard questions about like a job interviews, like why you choose this university and what are your goal for the futures and so on.
I'm not sure if you mentioned it. Did you also have one-on-one meetings?
Yes, I also have one-on-one meetings.
Do you still remember how many roughly?
I think there were around 2 or 3.
And half an hour or 1 hour, how long did it take?
I think it was around 1 hour.
I see. Yeah, and you said that you were actually interviewing like in person, not remotely.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious because I never had this kind of on-site interview.
Yeah.
And what do you think are the differences like between an on-site interview and also a remote interview? Did you, for example, have breakfast, lunch, dinner, and so on with the faculty members, or,
Yes.
or not?
Actually, I had the chance to try both, because for one interview was a virtual interview. And so the difference that, of course, the duration, because the virtual interview is much shorter. I remember that mine was about 2 hours or 3 hours, around that. But of course, the on-site interviews is much longer than that. And of course, it includes lunch and dinner with some faculty members.
And in what other regions did you interview? Like, did your experiences there differ compared to your visit at Auckland?
So I mostly applied to Asian Pacific universities, but I also applied for one European university. And for that university, I had the on-site interviews. And I found more or less a similar experience. The only difference that in Europe, it was a 2 days event, basically.
Okay. And I mean, it's called an interview. Did it actually always feel like an interview, or would you say it was like more conversation?
Of course, it looks like a conversation, but actually it's an interview every single second. I didn't feel like, but of course it's like this.
I see. Yeah, I guess also during breakfast
Yeah,
and
during
lunch.
breakfast, during lunch, during dinner is always about try to understand who you are actually, and see whether you will be a good fit in the department.
Mm-hmm. You still remember what kind of topics you chatted about during breakfast, lunch, and dinner? Was it still about research or about other topics?
I think I would say half. Also, we touch about some personal topics and also about some research topics. I think I would say half.
During these interviews, for example, during the one-on-ones, like I assume you mostly chat with people that are not very familiar with your research direction.
Mm-hmm.
So how did this influence on how you presented your research to them?
Of course, I have to train myself to actually explain my research in a very basic way, which is something actually is very important, because if you can explain your research in a very simple way, it's also good for you, because you can better promote your work. Because if only experts can understand your work, you will not have a good visibility about your research. Mm-hmm. So yes, I have to train myself, and as I said before, it's very important to ask friends to actually listen or what you want to say and give you feedback.
So you also did some mock interviews with your colleagues or friends to prepare for those?
Mock interviews, not. I just try to tell them if they ask me these questions, I will say like this. Something like that.
Makes sense. Did you also meet with students, graduate students, for example, in any of these
Unfortunately,
visits?
In Auckland, no, because in Auckland, it was during the semester break, basically, because it was in December. So in New Zealand, it's summer. So the students were not there. So I did not have the chance. But when I did the interview in Europe, I did have the chance to talk about with many students, actually. It was quite interesting to know what were their research topics.
Did you also have any meetings with, for example, deans, chairs, perhaps teaching staff?
Yes, I had meetings with them. And for the dean, it was a very quick meeting. But when I did the interview for the European university, I did have a long chat with the person that actually was deciding the teaching allocations and stuff.
And what did you chat specifically about?
We talk about more about teaching part of the job, like what are your topic that you like to teach, what are your experience in this teaching, and what is your teaching style, and also they talk a lot about what was their teaching style and see whether I had a similar experience or not.
I guess while you were writing your teaching statement, you already thought a lot about this kind of questions, right?
Yeah.
How did you prepare for the question, why this institution?
Okay, so for why this institution, I think in my case for Auckland was very easy because it's a very good university, it's a world-class university, it's a very big and also the location. Auckland is a big city, so it's very easy to answer this question. And also because of a personal reason, I would like to go back to that area.
While giving the job talk, did you receive any questions during the talk or mostly at the end?
For my job talk, I received a question at the end of the talk.
And were any of these questions difficult to answer, or were these questions that you anyway knew how to answer because you often thought about this, or because you already answered them, for example, when giving paper presentations and so on?
I think that every time you will receive a question that you never expected, but I think all the questions were actually very good, and there were no difficult questions at all.
During your first visit, did you already ask any questions about, for example, the location, life in New Zealand, and so on? Or is this something that is better asked after receiving an offer and then chatting with people?
I think it's very important to ask before and during the interview, because of course the personal life is an important factor. It's not only about the job, but also about how you will live in that place. So my suggestion is to don't wait about the last after you receive the offer, but actually you should ask this question during the interviews.
Yeah, we talked now about interviewing. Let's chat a bit about hearing back and deciding. And there the question is like, how did you feel during the waiting process? How long did it take until you heard back from the University of Auckland, for example?
Okay, so in my case, it was very particular because everything happened during the pandemic. It's because I had the interview just before the pandemic. And so my case is very particular because I had to wait 1 year before getting the position, but it's not, it's because of the pandemic. So it's not something common, I would say.
And after the visit, did you still continue interacting with the faculty, chatting with them about things?
Yeah, of course. I had a chance to talk with them via email, and actually it was something very helpful to go through this year of waiting.
Yeah, great. So I would say let's slowly wrap up. What kind of memories stuck with you from the process? Do you have any anecdotes also to tell? I mean, you already mentioned, for example, the 1 year waiting period, right? I guess that was unusual.
Yeah, this is very unusual. I don't. Yes, it was very, yeah, very tough. But I think my best memory I have are of course the on-campus interviews. I think those moments are the one that I will always remember, and I actually enjoy to meet people and understand how different university is working, stuff like that.
And what was the role of peers and mentors in the whole process?
So as I mentioned before, they are important to give you the feedbacks, because sometimes you focus too much in one topic and you don't see some other opinions, and that is not something good. So it's always better to ask opinions about your talk, about your research.
During these one-on-one meetings and in general, I guess you talked with many faculty about potential collaboration opportunities. So did any actual collaborations develop from these conversations? Are there still some faculty members where you have followed up about this?
I would say yes. I think once I start, I immediately start also some research collaborations.
And as a final question, what advice do you have for future faculty candidates?
Okay, my advice is that do not underestimate this process, because you need to dedicate a lot of time and effort, and you need to start early, and you need to prepare very well all the materials for the application. And also don't worry if you get some rejections, because this is part of the process, and this is indeed a very stressful and tiring the process, but also I believe there are many good moments and very valuable lessons that I learned during the process. And I believe that being a faculty member is one of the best jobs in the world. So actually, you should work hard for it.
Okay, great advice. And yeah, thank you very much for chatting with us, Valerio.
Thank you.